Hey everybody, welcome back to Living Traditions Homestead, where we've been building our dream life here in the country since we left corporate America and the big city 8 years ago.
Today we are going to be showing you kind of the update of our orchard. We planted this orchard about 3.5 years ago, and we haven't shown it in a long time. I feel like the last time we showed our orchard, they were pretty much still sticks in the ground.
Right.
And you guys have been asking for an update, so today we're going to do that for you.
Now, it's not that we've been trying to hide anything, it's just that, to be honest, the first few years of a fruit tree's life are pretty boring.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot going on. There's no fruit being produced, and really, up until really this year, they've still pretty much been sticks in the ground.
Yeah, there really hasn't been much to see. So today we're going to take you through the orchard, show you how all the trees are doing. But first, we want to take a step back a little bit and kind of explain where we are in the area that we have here that we're standing in and the layout.
Now, the area that we're standing in here where our orchard is, when we bought this property, this was part of our hayfield. You can see the big hayfield out there back behind me. Well, this was all part of the hayfield when we bought this farm. We decided that we wanted to set aside a 1-acre area to garden in, to have an orchard, and to have a berry patch. And that's what this area is that we are in right now. We divided it into 3 sections, 1/3 of an acre for each of those projects, and that's what we've been doing and building here for the last 3.5 years. So you can see over on this side, this is where our garden area is. This is where we did the big project last fall, where we switched from in-ground gardening over to raised bed gardening. That has been going really well. Then here in the center section is what we're going to be talking about and concentrating on today, which is our fruit orchard. And then over on the far end of this area, the last 1/3 of an acre, is our berry patch. Right now we have blackberries, raspberries, and grapes planted over there, but we do have plans in the future to also be adding blueberries. Now, one thing that we knew when we bought this property from our own experience in this area and from talking to the previous owner is that there is a large deer population in this whole part of Missouri, which is great because I do love to deer hunt, but it's not great when the deer get in and eat all of your fruit trees, eat your garden, eat your berries, everything else. So we did a lot of research on what would be the best way to keep the deer out of this area. And what we finally landed on was doing a double fence system around this entire 1-acre area. So now I'm standing in between the 2 fences of this double fence system. Like I said, we looked at a lot of different options to keep the deer out of our orchard and garden area. And most of what we found was the recommendation to put up fences that were at least 8 to 10 feet tall. 7 feet was kind of the bare minimum, but there's still a good chance white-tailed deer are going to jump over a 7-foot fence. So if we were going to do a single fence, we knew we were going to have to go at least 8 feet, probably even taller. That not only is a very hard project to do because we couldn't find fencing that was that tall, but it was also just didn't seem like kind of the look that we wanted for here on the homestead. So as we were doing our research, we came upon an old article. It was from the late 60s, early 70s in Mother Earth News online. We found an old article of it talking about doing a double fence system. And what it said is that if you do 2 fences that are 6 feet apart, they only have to be about 4 or 5 feet tall, and the deer will be afraid to jump in between them. Deer apparently have very bad depth perception, and they can't figure out whether or not they can make it over both fences, and they're afraid to land in the middle and get trapped, so instead they don't jump over them at all. And I can tell you, in the 3.5 years, almost 4 years now, that we've had this double fence system up, we have not had a single deer make it across here and into our orchard or garden, which is amazing because we do have a ton of deer. It's nothing to come out here at night and see 20 deer out in the hayfield. So you may from time to time, if you watch our channel, hear us refer to this as our chicken moat area. because what we've done is, because we had this kind of wasted space in between these two fences, is we've divided this into 4 sections, and we allow our chickens and now our turkeys to live in between these two fences, and it's worked out really, really well.
Now that we've talked about the layout of our orchard and this, growing area and how the fence system works, I want to kind of share with you just how well the orchard's doing. I also want to talk with you about some things that we're doing here in the orchard that are working really well, and one thing that we have tried that's not really working very well. But I want to start with just showing you how all the trees are and just letting you know what we're all growing in this orchard. So in this orchard, we have a total of 15 fruit trees. They're in 3 separate rows. Now back here, this is a mulberry tree. It actually looks like a mulberry bush. And we actually ended up planting 2 of these, but only this one came back. Now, last year I trimmed this because I was hoping it would just be a tree, but it really had a hard time coming back this spring, and I'm hesitant to cut it back because it struggled so much coming back this spring. So it may end up being, just a mulberry bush rather than a mulberry tree. Now, this mulberry bush, and actually all of the fruit trees in this orchard, are from Stark Brothers here in Missouri. So I just wanted to give them a shout out because these trees are doing so well, and we've always had great luck with Stark Brothers. Now, moving in front of me here in these 2 rows, over here we actually have 2 different plum trees. One is an elephant plum tree, and then this is a Shiro plum tree. They are doing really well. I'm so happy with how big this one's doing here. On this side over here, we start with our apple trees. This apple tree is the Liberty apple. And next here, this is actually a crabapple tree. It's a Whitney crabapple tree. Whenever you have apple trees in your orchard, you want to have a crabapple tree because it really helps with the pollination of all of the apple blossoms. Now, I chose the Whitney crabapple tree because the crabapples themselves are very large, almost like a small apple. So you actually have more fruit on it that you can actually do things with. Originally, I wanted to make crabapple jelly or crabapple jam. We'll see. We'll see when this starts fruiting what fun things I can do with the crab apples. Now moving forward into this row as well, this is another apple tree. It is an Enterprise apple, and this tree is doing the best out of all 3 of our apple trees. And then back here, actually in both of these rows, the last 2 trees are cherry trees. These 2 cherry trees, and I'll get to that one in a second, these 2 cherry trees are sweet cherries. This one here is the Emperor sweet cherry. Now this tree here is a Rainier sweet cherry tree, and you can see that actually it is dead. This tree did not come back from the winter, and actually the last 2 years it has really struggled. So I'll be making a decision whether or not I want to replace this with the same tree or another sweet cherry tree. Generally, the sour cherries or the pie cherries do better in Missouri than sweet cherries, but I really wanted to try to see if we could have sweet cherries, which are similar to the Bing cherries that are in the grocery store. Now, speaking of sour cherries and the pie cherries, we do have 2 of those trees over here. This one I think it's a really good size for 3.5 years. This one here is the Montmorency pie cherry, which is actually like the most famous pie cherry variety out there. And then this one here, this tree, which is a little bit smaller, is the Sure Crop pie cherry. Now, the last row over here, we have 2 pear trees. This one here is the Stark Honey Sweet, and this one is the Starking Delicious. Both of them are doing pretty well. They're still pretty small, but I think over the next year there's going to be a lot of changes and there's going to be a lot of growth here. Moving on in this row are our 2 peach trees. Now this peach tree here, if you would have seen it last year, you would have wondered if it was even gonna survive. It took a hit from something, I'm not sure what it was, and in the late winter, I made sure to do some careful pruning, and it has really come back really well. This peach tree is the Blushing Star, and this one here is a Red Haven. This one is doing much better than the first one. And I think that over the next couple of years, we're going to see some really great growth. Now, peaches in general are really difficult to grow here in Missouri. And, you know, honestly, orchard trees in general, it's kind of hard for you to get fruit on them consistently. Sometimes our last frost in the spring can be very late, which will kill the blossoms. So, you know, these trees can grow fine, but many years there's no fruit just because the last frost is so late that it kills all the flowers and the flower buds. But we're hopeful that on the years that that doesn't happen, we can get an abundance of fruit, which will make up for the years where the last frost takes all of the flowers and then they don't produce fruit. This last tree over here is the last apple tree of ours. This is an Arkansas black apple tree. Now, all three of the apple trees that we're growing here are very resistant to cedar rust. And cedar rust is very common here. It is transmitted by the native cedar trees that are here. There's a rust that grows on those cedar trees, and the spores of that rust come onto the apple trees and make dark spots and can affect really the quality of the fruit. It doesn't necessarily kill the trees, but the leaves get affected, and then the fruit can be kind of deformed and not really very good quality. So all three of the varieties, the Arkansas Black, the Enterprise, and the Liberty, are very resistant to the cedar rust, or people call it cedar apple rust or apple rust, and that's why I chose these three varieties specifically. Now I want to talk with you about some things that are working really well for us here in the orchard, and then one thing that's not really working really well. Now, every late winter, I have been pruning, and that has been really helping with these trees. I just follow a guide by the University of Missouri. They have some really helpful information about how to prune the different fruit trees. So I've been doing that. That has been working really well. I've also been fertilizing every spring. I've been just using a balanced standard fertilizer, and that has also been working really well for us. But I've also been using these tree trunk guards. I want to show you a little bit about how they work and what they do for your plants. So the guards that we've been using go around the base of the trunk here, and it protects it from the weed eater when we weed eat around it, but it also protects it from rodents and rabbits and stuff in the winter that will want to eat on the bark over the winter, and it protects it. So these have been working really well. The one thing I like about these is that they are, they'll expand. So as your tree grows, it will open up and will kind of not choke out the tree and prevent it from growing. But also when your trees get super big, you can connect two of them together here with these little clasps so that you can have two together to continue protecting them. So these are working really well for us. We bought these on Amazon. If you want to check them out, we'll make sure that they are in our Amazon shop. Now this is a different apple tree, and you'll see that it doesn't have one of these on the bottom. We were actually one short when we planted this orchard, and so this guy never got one of these protectors. So we did order more, and I'm just going to show you how easy this is and how they work. You just open that up, put it around the base of the trunk, make sure it is all the way down at ground level, and there. These last a really long time, and they're really not that expensive, and so it's really worth it to keep your trees protected and healthy. The other thing that's working really well for us in the orchard is how we have been watering. for the last couple of years. Now, our orchard, even though it's pretty established, the trees are pretty established, if we haven't had rain, at least 1 inch of rain in a week, then I start watering each row of the trees to make sure that they have ample water so that they continue to grow and produce nice fruit. We've tried several different methods over the years and have settled on this way being the best for us. We're actually using a soaker hose. And this isn't like the rubbery kind of soaker hoses you can find in the big box stores. This is kind of like fabric. And as the water fills it and tension builds, the water just kind of seeps out of kind of just the fabric, and it does a really great job. Now, there is a rubber bladder on the inside of here, which really protects it from basically bursting and preventing the seam to come basically unsewn, but it works really well. So what I do is I just run this soaker hose all the way down the end of the row, and I make sure it passes the last tree trunk by probably 4 feet or so, because I want all of the water to get down into all the roots. The roots of a tree like this fruit tree, in general, they come out as far as the farthest branch. So you should make sure that you're watering, this far out when you're actually watering. So I have this end probably 4 or 5 feet past the trunk, which is good. And I just make sure that there aren't any twists in here. Looking good, looking good. I'm just gonna move this one over here next to this trunk. And then we'll just turn it on at that point. I'm not gonna do it. We don't need to water. I'm just kind of giving you an example. Just gonna turn it on, and I'm gonna let this run for at least 2 hours, set a timer on my phone, come out and turn it off. Now, I generally will do each row a different day. So Monday I'll do this row, Tuesday that row, Wednesday that row, and then I actually move on to the grapes and the berries. And that's just how watering works here in our orchard. It works really well. Now, I do want to say, yes, I am watering the grass here. But this is just the easiest method and like the most thorough method that I have found to watering our orchard. So yes, I might be wasting a little bit of water on the grass over here, but it's doing such a fantastic job watering these trees, I don't really mind. The last thing I want to talk with you about in regards to the orchard is what is not working. And for us right now, the method that we are using to keep down the grass and the weeds around the trees is not working very well. Now, you want to have grass, and you want to have limited grass and limited weeds around your trees, because they're ultimately stealing nutrients and stealing moisture from the roots of your trees. So we wanted to find a way that was a little bit less work intensive to keep down the weeds and the grass. And so we found a rubberized weed mat specifically made to go around trees and fruit trees that claimed to keep out the grass and the weeds. We bought these last spring, and they're supposed to come way out here and go all the way around and keep out all of the grass and all of the weeds, but they are not working. The grass is growing underneath. We've got a lot of weeds that are able to germinate and grow through here, and overall, this is just not working well for us. Now, this is not the same material that we use in the garden. This is not the woven weed fabric. In fact, it's like totally falling apart and coming off in like chunks. You can see right here. It's a recycled rubber type of material, and it's just like falling apart and not doing its job at all. So the bad news is it was a big waste of money. But I guess the good news is we're going to be finding a better alternative and kind of back to the drawing board. So I wanted to share with you that not everything is perfect here in the orchard, and we've made some mistakes too. And if you come across this like recycled rubber tree weed mat that's in some of the big box stores, my vote is don't try it. It's not worth the money because it really doesn't hold up and it doesn't do the job well.
Now, there is one very frequently asked question that we get about growing all of this fruit, and that is, don't you guys eat a low carb diet? And yes, we do. As many of you know, over the last year and a half, almost 2 years now, we've been eating a low carb diet, a very low carb diet, usually less than 50 grams, more in the 20 to 40 grams of carbs per day. And doesn't fruit kind of go against that? Well, the truth is, yes, it does. So when we planted all of these trees, we weren't eating a low carb diet. We had no intentions of eating a low carb diet. And honestly, we never even thought we would. But Sarah and I both feel so great eating the way that we do now. We don't plan on changing that. But what I can tell you is that over time, over the last year or so, we've realized that we can add back in fruit every once in a while to our diet, as long as it is whole fruit. So I can eat an apple and it doesn't really affect my weight or anything else. I can eat some other fruit here and there and it doesn't really affect things, as long as it's whole fruit with all of the fiber, all of the skin on it, everything like that. So we will be eating fruit out of this orchard, I guarantee it. What we won't be doing is making things like jams and jellies and pie filling and all of the other sugar sweetened desserts that we could make out of this fruit. So yes, Sarah and I will eat some of this fruit, but we're also doing this for the next generation of our family. We don't have grandkids yet, but someday we will have grandkids, and these fruit trees will allow us to be able to make great baby food that we can make in the house. Let's also give us a great opportunity to freeze dry and make delicious snacks for grandkids in that way. So even though we may not eat as much of this as we would have at one time, we will still find plenty of uses for all of this fruit. What we can't eat or give or share to our family, we've got plenty of people at church that would be happy to take some of this fruit, I'm sure, and we will have no problem finding ways to bless the community with this fruit.
I know a lot of you have been very patiently waiting for an update on the orchard because we spend a lot of time out in the garden area. We just haven't ventured over this way with you guys to show you what's been going on in quite a while.
So all in all, we are extremely happy with the way that the orchard is going. Yes, we've had a couple trees die. Yes, the weed mat isn't working perfectly, but you guys, all in all, we couldn't be asking for a better experience with these fruit trees. They are doing extremely well.
We think maybe next year will be our first year with fruit.
Right.
We're excited about that, to finally get some fruit on these trees. I want to tell you really quick before we leave that every house that we have owned, we've planted fruit trees, and just when they're about to bear, we move.
Right.
So, but this time we are not moving.
Right.
I don't ever want to move. This is the last orchard, I hope, that we've ever planted.
Honestly, I think this year we would have had some peaches, but we had a crazy spring here this year. We had days in April this year that were in the 90s, and then after that we got another frost.
Right.
So these trees, they're very confused living here in Missouri, as are we a lot of times in the spring, because that is not uncommon here, and it does make it a little more difficult for the trees because they start to wake up thinking it's going to be summer, and then we get another frost. But all in all, we will get years, I think, where we have very good harvests, and we'll have years where we don't, and that's okay.
But for now, we're very excited with the progress of these trees. Again, all of them are from Stark Brothers. You guys, if you're enjoying videos like this, make sure that you hit that subscribe button. And remember, the best way you can help us here on the homestead is just to share our videos on your social media. Until next time, thank you so much for stopping by our homestead. Take care, and God bless.
God bless.